Leadership Forum perspective, we believe that what the mini budget presented by the Minister this afternoon is what, in all intents and purposes, could be called an austerity budget. So he's using very good language about containing spending. We want to see sustainable growth. But hidden underneath that is what is going to be the impact on both the national departments and provincial and local government to deliver on key areas. And our focus as the forum is primarily health, education and social development and social protection. And we're deeply concerned about the impact that this the brakes, so to speak, being put on public spending, and in particular on social spending. So while in the medium-term budget policy statement there's a clear commitment that this will not affect frontline services, and that there's an expectation that our departments will be cleaner and smarter and more efficient in the way that they work, which is important and is critical, and we need to weed out that kind of corruption and maladministration. But at the same time, this cannot be done in a context where there's now less money coming in for services that are clearly needed. And so we see in the Free State last year a report on the Stop Stockouts project that indicated that the Free State was one of the provinces hit the hardest with shortages and in some cases stockouts of essential medicines. And so the impact that the provinces are going to have in terms of the expectation that they will behave in line with this policy, we are deeply concerned about.
It's interesting you mentioned the minister's stance, because I watched him very aggressively talking about the fact that the poor and those vulnerable will not be hit with any policy or administrative changes here. Do you think more could have been mentioned? Well, let me ask you one more question a step ahead. Are you expecting anything from the February budget based on the hints you're getting here around health and education?
In terms of, hopefully, in the February budget, we want to see a far more progressive, fair tax system implemented. Of course, there's the Davis Tax Committee that's currently underway, and there are a number of suggestions. We're also very excited about the prospect of better tax administration. So there we want to be able to see that the size of the cake, so to speak, that the minister presents could be bigger, and it could be bigger by ensuring that the high net worth income earners in South Africa, these are people who earn over 5 million, a taxable income of over 5 million a year, to be paying a fair amount to that. So we also want to talk about not only a fair minimum wage or decent living wage, but we also want to talk about a maximum wage and what is socially responsible in the context of deep inequalities in South Africa. So we're hoping, and the hint is there and it's in the numbers, that in order to sustain and to really grow our services in terms of health and education, basic education, there's going to need to be a better mechanism for raising revenue, and that can be done in innovative ways. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to hit a taxpayer like myself. I'm not a high net worth individual, but it does mean that we should be ensuring that companies are paying the right amount of tax, that they are declaring their profits appropriately. There are concerns around transfer pricing and illicit financial flows of capital, and all of that could be brought back into the South African economy and invested back into small, medium enterprises and social services.
Were you expecting to hear more on that front? I mean, I thought myself I would have heard more on transfer pricing. I didn't. Did you expect more on those manageable curbing?
Yes, we also expected to hear, although it's a kind of double-edged feeling here, is that we were concerned about the language around nuclear power and the nuclear discussions that have been in the media, and we saw no mention of that to date, which is, we are optimistic if it means that we are going to be considering better, cleaner, greener economic kind of policies that could provide job creations. We have a project, one of our partners supports, called the Million Jobs Climate Campaign, where they show that there's innovative ways that we can create jobs and clean and green many of our buildings, enhance public transport and so forth. So while we were concerned and waiting to hear around nuclear, we don't see that going, the sort of movement in that direction.
What do you make of the warnings to unions that they should keep their wage increase requests to the inflation-linked numbers? I mean, we've got the public servants asking for a 15% wage increase. I think the Finance Minister was pretty clear on what is reasonable. What was your take on what he said to unions today?
So, I mean, this is a debate within the forum. We are clear that there are many public servants who earn incredibly high amounts of money, over $1 million a year. And so for them to be demanding a 15% increase would seem to be somewhat unacceptable. But for our mid to low level frontline workers that are critical, they should be paid a minimum decent living wage. So we would want to see a situation where the average South African wants to work in the public service. It's been a long time since we talk about job creation as part of the public service and doing, as it says, public service, doing work for the public. And so we see one of our concerns is that in this medium-term budget policy statement, outside of the need for increases where they should be in terms of salary requirements or wage requirements, but also in terms of ensuring that we have a wage bill that's employing the right people in the right places. And some of the core frontline staff for health, for example, is community healthcare workers, and we saw in the Free State they're precarious, they are employed under really bad conditions, they're expected to live off 2,500, 3,000 Rand a month, and yet they provide a critical service to so many South Africans who cannot make it to the clinic or need to make sure that they're on their treatment.
Well, we're going to have to leave it there. Toko Madogo from the Budget Expenditure Monitoring Forum. Thank you very much indeed for coming in.